All right, so we're just going to do 1 and 3 because we didn't finish the notes, then we'll finish the notes, and then we'll do 2 and 4 tomorrow. So number 1 says to find 2 coterminal angles, 1 positive and 1 negative, if you're given 120 degrees. So we said coterminal is the same location around the circle, right? Which means if it's in degrees, we would add what?
360.
Good. Add or subtract 360. So if I want to find a positive one, I would add the 360, and my answer's got to be positive. That one is. And then if I want to find a negative one, I would subtract 360, and I get negative 240. Again, positive must be positive, negative must be negative. So if it was so big that when I subtracted 360, it still wasn't negative, I'd have to do it again. Or vice versa. If it's so small that when you add 360, it's still not positive, you would keep having to add it until it gets to be positive. Okay, 2 we're going to go back to today because we're going to talk about complement and supplement in today's note. 3 said convert the angle to radian measure. Remember, if it's got the degree symbol, that's how you know it's in degrees. To get from degrees to radians, you do what? Good. Multiply by pi over 180. If I was going radians to degrees, good. Multiply times 180 over pi. So this one is times pi over 180. I can cancel through the zeros. 3 goes into both these, 5 and 6. So I get 5 pi over 6. Questions on either of those? Okay, so the first thing I want to do is go back to, if you go to 4-1 notes and you go back to this one, so we skipped this one. This was slide 12. This is degree, minute, second notation. So this is just another way of writing a degree, and it's called degree, minute, second notation. And it will look something like this, where you've got something, a number raised to a degree, and then another number with a single tick mark and another number with a double tick mark. If you separate this out, this is the degree part. This part is the minute part, and this part is the second part. So degree has the degree symbol, minute has 1 tick mark, and second has 2 tick marks. So sometimes you're going to get given it in degree, minute, second notation, and you've got to put it into degree, and then vice versa. Sometimes you'll get given in degree, and it will ask for it in degree, minute, second notation. So without a calculator that has that DMS, which I'll show you where that is, the basic way to convert it is to take what's here. Degree would stay as your degree, which is your whole number. The second number is minutes. So you divide by how many minutes are in an hour, which is 60. And the third number is seconds, and you take that and you divide it by the number of seconds in an hour, which would be 3,600. And then you would take all of those and add them together. So if you didn't have a calculator that would convert it for you, that's how you do it. Most of us have calculators that convert it for us. So if you open up your calculator, you turn it on. All right, so on your calculator above the apps button is a little thing that says angle, and that's the button we're going to utilize to get from degree, minute, second notation into decimal degree, which is the one without the double tick marks and single tick mark. So what I do is I would type 31, that's my degree. I would hit second, apps, because that's where my angle is, and you'll see a little degree symbol. You'll click on that. And then I'd get 47, and I go second, apps, and there's a single tick mark there. I hit enter. And then the last one is 12. And of course, your calculator can't make it easy on you and put it in the same menu. It is above your plus symbol. So I hit, on this calculator, I have to hit alpha, plus, and that's where my double tick mark is. So that's for the TI-83, the TI-83 plus, the TI-84, all of those have that kind of menu. And then you hit enter and you get the actual degree in decimal format. So everybody make sure they're able to do that, because some questions you're going to get given to you, it'll say like convert, it's actually going to come up a lot of times when we get to like our word problems, our law of sines and law of cosines. It will give it to you in that, and you've got to get it out of that on your own. Okay, those of you that have scientific ones, so anybody not have something like that, I might have to walk you through it because it's different. Okay, so then the second thing you want to do is work backwards. So if I'm given this one, if you're giving it to that way and you want to get it back into degree, minute, second notation, on that same menu, so if I bring up my answer, second, negative brings up my answer, or I could have written in that 31.78, all that stuff. And then I go back to that menu, second, apps is my angle menu. There's a little thing that says arrow DMS. So this is saying take it from decimal degree and put it into degree, minute, second notation, and it will put it back into that notation. So you want to bring back your answer, or in this case, that 31.786 repeated, second apps, and there's that little arrow DMS button. Again, you want to make sure you know how to do that because you're going to have to get from one to the other sometime. Okay, so again, you'll see, I think there's a couple questions in your homework getting from one to the other. Just make sure that you can answer those. All right, then we also left off here with complement and supplement. So these hopefully are words that are familiar to you from like geometry, middle school even. Okay, but two complementary angles sum to 90 degrees. The difference is that now you got to think about it in terms of radians. So if 90 degrees is the same thing as pi over 2 in radians, then if it gives you an angle and asks for its complement, if it's in degrees, you would do 90 minus that angle. And if it's in radians, you would do pi over 2 minus that angle. And then supplements are two angles that sum to 180 degrees. So if it is given to you in degrees, you would do 180 minus that angle. And if it's in radians, the equivalent of 180 is pi, so you do pi minus that angle. Both complements and supplements should be positive angles. So if you go to say, like it says, find the complement to 92 degrees, and you go to do 90 minus 92 degrees, you're going to end up with a negative angle, which means that there's really no complement. So if it's bigger than 90 or pi over 2, then there's no complement. If it's bigger than 180 or pi, then there's no supplement. And you would literally just write no complement or no supplement. You should never write a negative value for supplement or complement. All right, so it just says find, if possible, the A complement and B supplement to each angle. Go ahead, do these, and then we'll go over them. All right, so A is 3 pi over 2. First thing you can catch is that 3 over 4 is going to be bigger than a half, right? Which would be bigger than pi over 2, which means no complement. If you don't catch it, then you go to do pi over 2 minus 3 pi over 4. This becomes 2 pi over 4 minus 3 pi over 4, and I get negative pi over 4. Remember, you can't have a negative complement, so A would be no complement. And then the supplement would be pi minus 3 pi over 4, which is 4 pi over 4 minus 3 pi over 4, or pi over 4. So there is no complement, and the supplement is pi over 4. You're doing the pi over 2 or 90 minus the angle, and then 180 or pi minus the angle. So B, and you have a different one on your notes, but I'll do both.
So it can never be negative?
Can never be negative for a complement and a supplement.
Can it be 0?
No, it's got to be 2. Like a 0 angle is not an actual angle.
Okay.
Yeah, good question. So pi over 2 here. Again, 5/6 is bigger than a half. But if you don't catch it, I'd have to multiply by 3. So this would be 3/6 minus 5/6, negative 2 pi over 6. Again, no complement. And then the supplement would be pi minus 5 pi over 6. Or 6 pi over 6 minus pi over 6, or 5 pi over 6, which is pi over 6. And that's your supplement. The example on your notes is 82 degrees, right? Yeah. So 90 minus 82 is 8 degrees. That's your complement. And then 180 minus 82 is 98 degrees, and that's your supplement. Okay, make sure you add on, because your note looked like this, right? It split it in degrees and radians. make sure you put them both in there. So in degrees, you're doing 90 minus the angle. In radians, pi over 2 minus the angle. And then in degrees for supplements, you're doing 180 minus the angle and pi minus the angle. What? Okay, so actually, wait. All right, last thing in this section is arc length. So if you wanted to find the arc length, which is like the measure of the crust on a pie, okay, then the formula is S, which stands for arc length. So don't ask me why, it just does. Okay, R, which is a little bit more obvious, that's your radius. And then theta itself is in radians. So the most important part of this is to make sure that you convert anything that's in degrees to radians, and then you multiply it times the R. I have a tendency to like remember it as SOR, so I invert the R and the theta. It's the same thing, okay? Just the order's different. So if it gives it to you in degrees, the first thing you have to do is convert it to radians and then multiply it times the radius. If it's already in radians, then all you have to do is multiply it times the radius, okay? But it's going to give you the measure like it's the crust of the pie. And this would be in a unit of length. So it could be in centimeters or inches or something like that, where it would actually be a unit of length. So it says find the length of the arc. Number one gives you the radius and theta is in what? Degrees. So the first thing you're going to do is convert that to radians. Multiply by pi over 180. 2, 3. This is 2 pi over 3. And then it's that times the radius, which is 3. Cancel the 3's, and I get length is 2 pi. If it gave me a unit, I would put it on there. Like if it said inches or centimeters, I'd put it on there. But right now, it's just 2 pi units. You want to keep these answers exact. So you will keep pi as pi. You won't use your button on your calculator. You won't simplify that as 3.14. If it's fraction form, you're going to give it to me in reduced fraction form, not decimal form. All right, and then the second one is an actual circle. What do I know about the theta? It's in what? It's in radians this time, so all you have to do is multiply out 4 pi over 5 times 7. And I get 28 pi over 5, and this time it gave me a unit, which is centimeters. And again, you'll leave it exact. So if it's a fraction, it should stay a reduced fraction, and then the pi should stay in it. Questions on either of those?
You said you reduce it, right?
Reduce it, but then leave it. Like you can leave it improper.
Okay.
All right, and then the last example. Oh, sorry. Now it says find the radius of the circle with the given information. So you're still given 2 pieces of information. You're still using the same formula. The only difference is what parts of those formula you're given. The length of the arc would be your S, and then theta is already in radians. So I'd get pi equals 3 pi over 4 times the radius. And then you can multiply by the reciprocal and do it in one step. Multiply both sides by 4 over 3 pi. This is over 1. The pi's would cancel, and I end up with 4/3 equals the radius. Or I could have separated it out. So pi equals 3 pi over 4 times the radius. I could have multiplied by 4 on both sides, canceling out my denominator. And then I'd get 4 pi equals 2 pi over 4. Divide both sides by pi. The pi cancels out, and I get 4 equals 3r. Last step would be to divide by 3. And I'd end up with the same answer. So whichever makes the most sense for you is which method you want to stick to. And then B, again, given S and theta. So 24 pi equals 4 pi times the radius. And then Divide both sides by 4 pi. Pi's cancel. 4 goes into 24 6 times. So my radius would be 6. So you got to memorize a couple of things from this section. How to get from radians to degrees and degrees to radians. How to find coterminal angles. How to find supplements and complements. And then the arc length. Questions on anything 4-1 related? Okay.